Well, this is the second week of this series, My Not So Perfect Family. Before we dive into that, just a few housekeeping things. We have some changes coming in some of our scheduling and programming that's kicking off next week. We've got a pretty full house in here this morning, parents, grandparents, and kiddos. But next Sunday at 10:30, we are launching a brand new kids worship service called Kids First Worship. It'll be during this hour. Elementary will be in the kid zone, and then we'll be filling up these pre-K spaces, and it is fantastic. We talked about this first on August 20th at our last kind of family meeting, business meeting for our church, and we invited you to respond to some new scheduling rotations in serving and volunteering. And I'll just be honest with you, myself, Jamie, Brandon, all of us have really kind of been blown away at your response to that, because we were a little worried about asking people to step out of this time one Sunday out of 4 to serve. But I'll just tell you, within a few days, Jamie came back and said, I'm fully staffed, all 4. Like, that's worth clapping for, because you responded to that. And so some of you are thinking, whew, I don't have to do anything now. Like, I escaped, dodged a bullet on that one, but there's still room for you to serve. And trust me, as that thing grows, we're going to need more small group leaders in our elementary area. We're already preparing the rooms as we move down this back hallway. We're kind of doing a mild renovation on each of those to kind of update them and prepare them. And so Jamie's already got plans for us to move right down the hall and fill up all those rooms. So there are spots for you to serve. We have a new Kids First Wednesday program that started this past Wednesday night with 80 kids in attendance. That is a huge number, and plus all the workers. And there were workers everywhere looking for something to do, showing the love of Jesus to kids. We're really excited about that. And so effective next Sunday, we won't be doing any kids ministry during the 9:30 hour. We're focusing all of our attention on the 10:30 hour. So just make sure that you're aware of that. We know that affects some of the adult classes, and several of them are doing the hard work. They're making sacrifices to move to different times and locations. And if we can help you or resource you in any way as your class attempts to do that, there's also women's Bible studies and other groups that are going to be starting through the week to give more places for people to connect. We want more people in groups, not less, but some pretty significant changes that are kicking off next Sunday. Another thing that we're doing, you probably noticed that we're doing a little bit of work on the parking lot. We're excited to be able to get that parking lot sealed and restriped so you can actually see where you're supposed to park. That'll be pretty neat, but also protect it and maybe preserve it get us a few more years out of that. I'm so excited that we were able to do that with money that we had because of the way that you've given. Because you've given generously over the last few, Yes, because we didn't have to come back and say, hey, could you give a little bit more? We need to do this. Could you give a little bit more? We need to do that. We're able to do that with money that we already had in the bank. And that's an exciting thing. I know some of you, if you've been here for a while and you've maybe been through some of the lean days financially, and trust me, we're not out of the woods, so don't put those checkbooks away just yet. We're not there, but I'm going to tell you this, God is going to do something, and we're going to see all of the numbers are going to get exactly where he wants them to be in the months that are ahead of us as we do whatever it takes really to be able to reach the next family, the next one who needs Jesus. Another change that we're going to make, and I got a couple images, is that we are adjusting the way the traffic flow is going to work around this building. So this drive that goes around is going to be one way this way, all the way around the building. And the reason that we're doing that is because we are doing all family parking in the south parking lot on the back side of the building. So if you have little ones, we want you to be able to get them in and checked in, because the primary check-in starting next Sunday for your kids in the 10:30 hour is going to be in the kids zone. If you just have like a nursery age one, you can check them in at the nursery check-in station there. But the primary check-in place is going to be back at the kids zone. So we don't want you to have to park over here on the front 40 and walk a quarter of a mile. So we're going to give you that whole parking lot back there, and we're going to fill it up. I already know. And we've got plans to grow the parking on the back side, on the south side of the building. So starting next week, keep this in mind that we're going to be one way all the way around so that we can do some parallel parking along this side as well. It's going to be safer for our kids, and it's going to create new parking avenues for families. That's you and new families that are going to be coming. So be looking for new signs. And then all I would ask is just kind of obey the signs, you know. I know some of you are like, no, there's no way I'm driving in this side of the building. You'll never stop me. Okay, that's fine. But maybe when you see a little one getting out of their car, you'll realize, hey, this is not about me. It's about them. And so we're going to try to create some new avenues for that. Literally new avenues, new ways for people to park. We're really excited about that. So as I said, I'm kind of winded from talking about all that stuff. Y'all give me a little minute? This is the second week of this series, My Not So Perfect Family. Last week we looked at the ideal, the picture perfect family. And if you were like me, what you probably discovered from that was that that's really hard to accomplish. And my family doesn't look like that very much of the time. Every now and then we'll nail it, but most of the time we don't. And so this week, I want us to look at another aspect of family and really the not so perfect family, and that's this idea of conflict. So this message is the family that fights. Now we're starting each of these messages with kind of a little bit of fun. There's a story about two brothers. They're 8 and 9 years old, and they were in a big fight so bad that the mom had to separate them, sent the 8-year-old to his room. He was in there for a little while, and he came back out just despondent, crying. And he had a note that he had found under his pillow. And this is what the note said. It said, you may not be able to make that up, but it says, I hate you. That's what the note said. And he's crying, and the mom sees the note, and she begins to explain, listen, honey, your brother, he didn't mean that. Sometimes we say and do things when we're angry that we don't mean. And right about then, the younger brother interrupted her to show her the other side of the note, which said, from mom. The 9-year-old never confessed to having written that. Oh, that's obviously a mom's handwriting, right? Because moms, that's what you do, right? I hate you from mom, and you put it under the pillow, like the tooth fairy. Just a little surprise for you, little Johnny, there you go. So there's that, and that's kind of how conflict looks. Sometimes, though, you may feel like you're the only one in your family who realizes what's going on. Like you may be the person in your family that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if everyone in your family would just shut up and listen to you, everything would get better, right? If they would just, several of you shaking your head like, oh yeah, I see kids, teenagers shaking their head. Don't know what they're doing. If they would just listen to you. Sometimes it seems like maybe everybody seems to think everything is great, but you know the truth. You know how bad it is. Maybe it's a lot like this particular family picture, and everyone seems to be having a great time, except Dad. And Dad, he seems to know that there's something going on. Am I right? How many dads are like that? You're like, I'm done with this. I'm over the goofy picture. So what do we have in common in family? If there's one thing we have in common, it's that we all fight. We all have conflict, I'll say it that way, because some of you come from that, we never fight, everything's just harmonious at all times. But we all have conflict. Some of us come from loud families. How many loud families out there that you're willing to admit it? All my kids, raise your hand, because you know it. We are a loud family, okay? Some of you come from quiet families. Maybe painfully quiet. We never fought. We just didn't talk about anything, right? But there's always conflict. We all handle it a little bit differently. Some of us are peacemakers. We're going to do whatever it takes to just keep the peace. No, don't yell. Don't yell. Don't get angry. We're going to keep the peace no matter what. Some of us are sulkers, right? We're just going to go to our room. We're going to take our toy and go home. We're going to pout. Some of us are stuffers. That's where you take all the emotions and you just push them down and pretend they're not there. You guys know people like that, right? Eventually that stuffing down blows up. Some of us are the litigator. We're going to try, we got to talk it out. We have got to talk it out. And it usually works out that the litigator is married to someone who is the sulker, who is the quiet person, and they don't want to talk about anything. Just give me a minute, give me some space. No, we got to talk this out. I'm going to convince you. The litigator is always right, never wrong. And if everybody would just listen to the litigator. Or maybe you're like me and you're the screamer, right? I'm going to get it out, and the louder I can be, the better I'm going to feel. Just got to get it out, get it up, get it high, get it loud. So why do we fight? What's the source of conflict? Now, this isn't a moment for confession. I don't need to know all the dirty laundry. Well, if you just knew what she did, what he did, what they said, how they acted. James, the brother of Jesus, in James chapter 4, he gives us the source of all conflict. Looks like this, starting in verse 1. What is the source of wars and fights among you? Don't they come from your passions that wage war within you? You desire and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and wage war. You do not have because you do not ask. And you ask and don't receive because you ask with wrong motives, so that you may spend it on your pleasures. Why do we fight? What is the source of conflict? I've got a few things, and then I'm going to kind of give us some steps of how we can kind of lower the temperature when it comes to conflict in our homes. The first thing you got to know from this, and it's what James shows us here, is that the issue is never the issue. Am I right? I had the privilege last year to spend about 3 or 4 months with a really gifted Christian counselor. And if some of you are going, I knew that guy was crazy. Like, I knew it. You're right, I am, and so are you. And it would probably benefit most of you to find a really good one. But one thing that Dr. Bartley helped me with is to realize that the issue is never the issue. There's always something underneath it. And usually there's something underneath that, and something underneath that, and something underneath that. So, Cary, don't start psychoanalyzing us this morning. Just know this. The issue is never, or at least rarely, the issue. There's something else going on. Now take a moment with me. Let's do a little time travel, okay? If you need to close your eyes, you can. You don't have to. But go back in time to the last time there was the big fight, the big argument, the big conflict in your family. And think about what set it off. I can think about it in my mind, okay? And even in that moment, I knew that that issue wasn't really the issue. In verse 1, he says, what is the source of the wars and fights among you? Don't they come from your passions that wage war within you? The issue is never the issue. The issue is just what gives us the excuse to handle what it is within us that is warring. And here's what it is. We fight because our expectations are not met. This is just going to be insanely practical, okay? We expected something. We got something different. It caused conflict. It's as simple as that. He says, what is the source? It's wars that wage within you. In verse 2, the first part, he says, you desire and do not have. You're wanting something that you're not getting. Isn't that just what it really comes down to? You want your kids to obey. They're not obeying. You get angry. There's conflict. You want your husband to be more loving and maybe affectionate, and he's not, and it causes conflict. You want your mother-in-law to leave you alone, and she doesn't, and there's conflict. But here's the thing, it's probably even something beneath that. You're wanting something that you're not getting. You have expectations that are not being met, and it causes conflict. But it's not just that. He says the expectations that you have and they're not being met, it's because we don't ask. First he says you desire and don't have, you murder and covet and cannot obtain. So you have all these desires, you do whatever it takes to try to make it happen. You don't get it, so you fight and wage war. And then the second part of verse 2, he says this, you do not have because you do not ask. Some translations say you do not have because you do not ask God. The one you're reading may say because you do not ask God. I would say this, it's both. Oftentimes we're expecting something from others that we should be asking from God. In other words, if you're looking for fulfillment, if you're looking for completion in your spouse, you are expecting that need to be met by someone who does not have the ability to meet it. That whole Jerry Maguire, you complete me thing, that's not real. Honestly, the idea that we have bought into that there is a soulmate out there, this perfect person, and if we could find that perfect person, they would meet all of our needs and they would complete us. You do not stand maybe in this spot on your wedding day incomplete because you lack that marriage to that person. They don't have the ability to complete you. You're expecting something from someone and you should be asking God for it. What you lack, God can provide. They can't. She can't. He can't. Those kids can't. Nothing else can. So you're expecting something from someone that you should be asking from God. But then also, just on a really insanely practical level, you're probably expecting something from someone you've never asked them for. They don't even know that you expect that of them. You don't have it because you don't ask. Because what is like the number one problem in marriages? If you ask, if you do the surveys, it always comes down to one thing: communication. He doesn't talk enough. She talks too much. That's the cliche, right? It can be flip-flopped. I'm not going to buy and it's got to be one way or the other. But either way, even if there is a lot of talking, there's often rarely enough communication. Because we're not actually talking about what needs we have that we feel aren't being met. Because that's honest and raw and vulnerable. And men in the room, when was the last time we sat down across from our wives and said, this is what I need from you? And it wasn't something that was just insanely selfish. Do we have that conversation at all? This is what I really need. Something Sarah started doing a few years back is on our days off, early in the day, usually as soon as we get up, she'll say, hey, what are your expectations for the day? And mine are always, I don't want to go anywhere and I don't want to do anything. That's my expectation for every day off ever. I don't want to go. I don't want to take the kids anywhere. I love them. Let's just stay home. Maybe y'all are like, anybody else like that? It's like, I don't want to go anywhere. Okay? And then she'll go, okay, well, here's my expectations for the day. We're going to plant a garden and we're going to remodel the whole house and we're going to. And so then we know what the expectations are. That way we know that neither one of us are going to be happy. Because I'm going to be doing stuff I don't want to be doing and going places I don't want to go, and she's never going to finish that list. And it works out. We're both equally miserable. But at least we know what to expect. We have conflict. We fight because our expectations aren't being met. And our expectations often aren't being met because we just haven't asked. We haven't asked God for it. You need to look at this situation, you look at the scenario, look at what this is that you're fighting about and say, is this something that she or he can even give me? And if they were to do exactly what I want them to do, would that really make me happy? Do I even really know what it is that I want? I'm putting an expectation on you that I should only be expecting from God. Or I'm putting an expectation on you that I've never even told you about. I'm wanting something I don't have, and it's because I haven't asked. I haven't asked God, and maybe I haven't even asked you. We fight because we don't ask. And because our motives are selfish. Verse 3. You ask and don't receive because you ask with wrong motives. I didn't even have to do that point like the Bible just did that point for me. Wrong motives. So that you may spend it on your pleasures. Why do we fight? What's the source? The source is something within me. What is the thing within me? It's an unmet expectation. Why isn't it being met? Because I'm either not asking God for it or I have never even asked you for it. I'm not talking to God, I'm not talking to you, and even when I do, my motives are selfish. That's what James says. He goes, why is all this happening to you? Why is all the conflict, the struggle, the fighting? The wars? What is all this? Well, you've got unmet expectations. You've got desires within you. There's a war going on within you. The conflict in your home starts within you. Cary, are you saying that it's all my fault? No. But I'm saying it's partly your fault. I don't know how big of a part. So what can we do, first of all, to lower the temperature? Maybe it's a really hot zone right now in your house. Like there's high levels of conflict, fighting, and maybe that's high levels of volume, or maybe you're in a quiet house and it's really, really painfully quiet in your house right now. Like there's not just cold, like frozen shoulder, like no talking going on. Sarah came from a loud house. I came from a loud house. Guess what we got? We got a loud house. But maybe the temperature it's boiling over right now. So, Cary, it's not that bad at home right now. Just a little bit of this, a little bit of that. What can we do right now to relieve the conflict? Well, if it's not all your fault, but it's at least partly your fault, what you have to do first of all is own your part. Own your part. James 4:1, what is the source of wars and fights among you? Don't they come from your passions that wage war within you? Part of the conflict is within you, and you got to own your part of it. How big of this fight, how much of it is you? I don't know. The thing is that most of us in situations of conflict, in the middle of a fight, we don't want to own any of it. It's all their fault. And then maybe you're so isolated within it now that it's not just, it's the wife, it's the kids, they're all against me. It's the husband, the kids, they're all against me. They've brought in my parents, everyone, and they're all wrong and I'm right. I'm just going to tell you this, you got to own your part because it starts within you. Luke 6:31 says, do to others as you would like them to do to you. That's just golden rule stuff. Own your part. But then this, Numbers 30, verse 2, when a man makes a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to put himself under an obligation, he must not break his word. He must do whatever he has promised. In a marriage relationship, owning your part, just gentlemen, owning your part means that you keep your vow, you keep your promise regardless of the other person's part in the conflict. Own your part. Around here, what I tell Jamie and Brandon, if anything happens, I say, just blame it on me. And they go, no. I said, just blame it on me, I can take it. Trust me, if you were to walk into your home today and say, you know what, I'm just going to say this is all my fault. Like for me, I could walk in and I could with all honesty say this is all my fault. Whatever conflict's going on, it's all my fault. I could look at my kids, they could be upset with me because I've asked things of them, they're not obeying, and there's this conflict going on. And I could say, you know what, guys, your disobedience, it's my fault. How is it your fault, Dad? Well, if I'd never married your mom and we would have never had you, you wouldn't be here to disobey, and none of this would have happened. It's all my fault. So, Cary, that kind of sarcasm is probably not going to lower the temperature in my house. But are you willing to look at any situation and say, God, show me how much of this problem is me? How often when we begin to pray in these moments of conflict, do we begin by praying for the other person? And not saying, God, show me in what's going on within me. The passions, the desires, the unmet. Show me what it is in me. Not change the other person, God, but if there's anything that needs to change in me, let's do that first. That is owning your part of the problem because it is never one-sided. You got to roll. Say, Cary, you don't know, they took advantage of me, they abused me, he cheated on me, she cheated on me. How is any of that my fault? I'm not saying you caused it. I'm saying you walk into it and you say, God, if there's anything here that needs to change in me, change that first. Maybe right now some of you are in situations where it seems to be 110% their fault. I can't see any way I did any of this. Have you taken the moment to go to God and say, God, reveal in me the passions, the desires, the war that's waging in me? Own your part. Because the thing about it is that if you will own your part, even if it's minuscule, even if it is such a small slice of the pie, even if it's less than 1% of the problem, when you do that, it changes the perspective of the other person. It does. Maybe in a small way. It may not completely rectify the situation, but what it will do exactly in that moment is it will lower the temperature. It will lower the level of the conflict when you own your part, even if it's tiny. Here's the second thing, and I put it second, and I'm aware of how this works. Pray first. So, Cary, shouldn't that have been number one? I'm going to tell you this. For most of us in the middle of conflict, how many of you, your first instinct is prayer? If it is, it may be like some of David's prayers in the Psalms where he was like, cast out my enemies, crush their skulls, destroy them in front of me, disembowel them. It was really ugly. Like maybe that's how your prayers have sounded lately for your loved ones. Pray first. He says in verse 2, you do not have because you do not ask. Philippians 4:6 says, don't worry about anything, but in everything, through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Saturate it, soak it, begin and end it with prayer. And not just prayer for them, prayer for you. Not just God changed their heart, but God changed mine. Just as David, he did pray those ugly prayers, but he also prayed the search me and know me and reveal if there's any wicked way in me. Pray first. Number 3, check your motives. You ask and don't receive because you ask with wrong motives. Proverbs 16:2 says, all a person's ways seem right to him, but the Lord weighs motives. For me, that's kind of the one that's really telling, because in those situations where it seems like I am not in the wrong, it's all on them, I look at that and go, wait a minute, but what if it's just that everything seems right to me? But God has to weigh the motives. Check your motives. If you got everything you ask for in your family right now, would it benefit your whole family or would it benefit you? Say, well, Cary, I like to think that what I want for my family is what's best for them. But guess what? You're probably wrong at least half the time. And what if your motives are wrong? What if it is about you controlling? What if it is about your unmet desires? And what if it isn't about what God sees and God knows, because you think your ways are right? But say, God, I think my ways are right, but I need you to weigh my motives. I'm going to check them at the door, God, and say, okay, God, what is it here that I'm not seeing about what I want out of this situation? Check your motives, and then speak and act with humility. You can be right about the issue and completely wrong in the way that you handle it, because you didn't act in humility. Philippians 2:1-4, if there's any encouragement in Christ, if any consolation of love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, make my joy complete by thinking the same way, having the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. And then verse 3 says this, do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility consider others as more important than yourselves. This would actually mean that in the middle of a conflict, we would actually think that it's more important that they get what they want than that I get what I want. And that is hard. Depending upon the difficulty of the conflict, the severity of the fight, it may be almost impossible. They may have already acted and done and said things that makes it, you feel like it's impossible for me to think that what they want or that they are more important than me. But that's what humility requires. Do nothing out of selfish ambition. Don't do anything to get what you want, but do everything in humility, considering others as more important than yourselves. Everyone should look out not only for his own interests, but also the interests of others. And I am not talking about you feeling like you're the only one in your family who is right, and if they would all listen to you, everyone's lives would get better. I'm not talking about being all up in everybody else's business. I'm talking about acting and speaking with humility, as though you may realize that you don't know it all and you're not always right. And that maybe you care about something more than you getting what you want. That's what humility requires. All families have this in common. We all fight. When we talk about the family that fights, if I were to say that, some of you, a family came to mind. Like you know a family and they fight all the time, cats and dogs maybe. Maybe it's your neighbors, you hear them through the walls. We try to deal with the symptoms of this conflict in lots of ways. But I believe God wants us as his followers to go deeper. That's why we get this teaching here from James, the brother of Jesus, to go to the heart of the issue. The truth is simply this: in your family, you're not perfect, and neither is anyone else. You're not always right, and neither are they. You're not more important than they are. Truthfully, don't we tend to expect things from other people that we don't even expect from ourselves? Don't we tend to judge others by their actions and ourselves by our intentions? That's what we do. There's this double standard. And the truth is that living and acting and speaking in humility, owning our part even if we're having a hard time finding out how much of this could possibly be me, is not fair. The truth is that a lot of your family situations, the conflict, the fights, all it's not fair. They don't fight fair. What they've done isn't fair. Hey, guess what? Fair isn't really even a thing. We don't live in a fair world. Truth is that I don't think any of us really want what's fair in every area, do we? We don't want completely fair. Completely fair means I get pulled over every time I speed because that's fair. And I get a ticket every time because that would be fair. Fair means that every time you lie, you get caught. Every time. Every time you're selfish, it gets called out. You know, last week we looked at the ideal family, this New Testament picture-perfect family. And we saw that none of us measure up. But the challenge at the close of the message last week was not that we try to pretend that we're perfect, but that we own the reality and live in the tension between my imperfectness and the standard that God has for me, and we try to close that gap. As we respond today, the band's going to go ahead and start getting into place. Here's the commitment I want to challenge you to today. I want to challenge you to lower the temperature in your family. And all I mean by that is, whatever the conflict is, maybe you're a family that it's high conflict, it's every day, it's always something. Maybe it's been one of those things that's been building over years, and you may have a lot of really, really difficult work to do. But that we commit to lowering the temperature, maybe even lowering the volume. And it starts within. It starts with us being brutally honest with ourselves. Owning our part. Praying before we speak. And then when we do speak, we speak and we act with humility. That's the challenge for us. The thing is that it's hard, but it's really simple. It's really hard to do this. It's really hard to humble ourselves. But if we were to look at our families and say, I'm not perfect and neither are you, but I love you, and I'm willing to own my part of the problem and cut you some slack. How might that change things? 1 Peter 4:8 says this, and we'll close up. Above all, maintain constant love for one another, since love covers a multitude of sins. It's love that drives us. It's love that compels us. It's love that causes us to walk into conflict and say, okay, how much of this is my fault? It's love that says, I will humble myself. And I won't do anything out of selfishness or conceit. I won't think that I'm better. I won't think that I'm smarter. I won't think that I'm always right, but I will humble myself. And I will consider you as more important than me. I'll consider my spouse, my children, fill in the blank, as more important than me. I won't just look out for my own interests, my own desires, my own expectations, but for theirs. How can I serve you? That's why Peter says above all, because love will cover it. And that's not pie in the sky. That's not fairy tale family. That's the reality of walking into everyday life situations and going, okay, I know at least part of it's on me. And I'm going to begin with me. Let's pray. God, today, give us the courage and the boldness to walk into our family situations, no matter how difficult they may be, no matter how wrong the other person may be, and say, God, show me what of this is me. Show me my wrong motives. Show me my part. Show me what of this is my fault. God, humble me and give me the strength to humble myself before my family.